Probably tasted baklava. It's made with a paper-thin, flaky dough called phyllo, the Greek word for leaf. Phyllo dough itself is low-fat and cholesterol-free. Unfortunately, the stuff they usually fill it with isn't. Phyllo dough can be made by hand or by machine. Either way, it starts with the same dough recipe. The proportions are roughly 40% water to 60% flour. They use two types of wheat flour, high-protein flour to make the dough strong and flexible, and low-protein flour to make its texture smooth. They also add sorbate, a preservative, to increase shelf life. After about 15 minutes of mixing, the dough is ready. They cut off a section and feed it into a machine called the divider, which transforms it into a cylindrical wad. They hand roll the wad into a rough ball, then feed it 2 or 3 times through a machine that kneads the dough into a rounder, harder ball with no air bubbles trapped inside. They can tell when it's ready just by feeling it. Then a machine called the sheeter flattens the ball into what looks like pizza dough. Workers stack about 30 sheets with craft paper in between to absorb some of the moisture. Now, the key step, opening the dough. First, they lay a large cotton cloth over the work surface. It must be 100% cotton to absorb the moisture. Otherwise, the dough would stick together. They take a sheet of dough and begin stretching it by hand until it's approximately 2.5 meters square. Even though the dough is stretched thin, it doesn't tear. This is due partly to its protein content and partly to the skill of the worker. They repeat the process with all 30 sheets, stacking them one on top of the other. Then they take a plank of wood, called a sanida in Greek, and roll the dough sheets onto it one by one, removing the cloths that were in between. They sprinkle cornstarch on the dough, just enough to prevent sticking. Too much cornstarch will burn the dough. Now they move the sanida to another table and cut along one side of the dough. They remove the wood and open the sheets flat. Then they cut rectangles measuring 33 by 43 centimeters, standard phyllo size. Each sheet of phyllo dough is about as thin as a sheet of tissue paper, but it's strong and flexible enough not to tear when a baker works with it. Machine-made phyllo dough is a much faster method used primarily for mass-produced frozen food items. An automated machine called the stretcher transforms a big wad of dough into a thin, flat sheet, applying just the right amount of cornstarch. A continuous air current coming from underneath creates an air bubble. The height of the bubble tells them whether the dough is the right consistency. The dough dries under infrared lamps. This step is necessary because this method doesn't use craft paper and cotton cloths to absorb the excess moisture. The dried sheet of dough rolls onto a spool. They cut along the side to release the dough and lay it flat. Using a template, they cut the standard size rectangles, yielding 800 sheets of phyllo. They roll about 20 sheets together at a time and wrap them in plastic. Then they vacuum pack and heat seal the package. Phyllo dough stays fresh for 6 weeks in the refrigerator, 6 months in the freezer.